My name is Mary Womble. I'm 35 years old. Right after the judge signed the decree, Philip's lawyer smirked and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Look at this pathetic woman. You came in as a successful man's wife. You're walking out with 2 cheap suitcases and that disgusting rotting shack. Enjoy being broke, humiliated, and worthless, Mary. That's all a useless woman like you will ever have." I walked out into the freezing November rain dragging 2 beat-up suitcases. No car, no home, no money, just $1,100. I begged a friend to let me crash on her couch one last night. I cried myself to sleep, jobless, soaked, and completely destroyed. They laughed as I left. They mocked the worthless piece of junk my grandfather left me. They had no idea that on the 7th night, behind his painting, I found a sealed envelope, and what was inside turned their victory into their worst nightmare. The courthouse cleared fast after the judge signed the papers. November 11th, 2025, 3:47 in the afternoon. 10 months of legal proceedings reduced to a signature and a gavel. I gathered my single manila folder and walked toward the door. My hands were shaking. I'd lost everything: the house, the savings, the car I couldn't afford to fix. Everything we'd built over 7 years of marriage. In the hallway outside courtroom 4C, Mitchell Crane stepped directly in front of me. Philip's attorney. The man who'd charged $650 an hour to systematically dismantle my life. He was close enough that I could smell his cologne. Expensive. Overpowering. That's when he said it. Loud enough for the court clerks to hear. Loud enough for the other attorneys and paralegals walking past. Loud enough to make sure I understood exactly what he thought of me. People turned to look. Some stared. Some looked away quickly, embarrassed. No one said anything. No one helped. I stood there for 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. Then I walked past him and headed for the exit. The rain hit me the moment I stepped outside. Cold. November in Charlotte. 41 degrees and falling. I had 2 suitcases. Black Samsonite. One medium, one large. Everything I owned in the world fit inside them. I stood under the courthouse awning and called my friend Angela. "Can you pick me up?" My voice cracked. "Please." She arrived 18 minutes later. I threw my suitcases in the back of her car and got in. She took one look at my face and said, "Don't talk, just breathe." We drove in silence for 10 minutes. Then I started crying, and I couldn't stop. The divorce had taken 10 months from filing to final decree. Not because of North Carolina's 1-year separation requirement. I'd filed on fault grounds: adultery. I'd discovered Philip's affair in September 2024. Found the text messages on his phone, confronted him. He'd moved out the same week. The affair had been going on for 6 months, with a colleague at his law firm. But 10 months is a long time when you're bleeding money you don't have. When you've lost your job because you missed too many days for depositions and court dates. When your car breaks down and you can't afford the $4,200 transmission repair. When your husband's attorney drags out every single hearing, every discovery request, every mediation session. At the time, I thought Mitchell Crane was just being cruel, making me suffer because he could. I didn't know he was buying time, waiting for me to become desperate enough to sell the only thing they couldn't take from me in court. That night, lying on Angela's couch in her small West Charlotte apartment, I pulled out the deed to my grandfather's cabin. 1847 Old Mountain Road, Vilas, North Carolina. Assessed value: $32,000. I looked it up on my phone. Street view showed nothing but trees, no cabin visible, just a gravel driveway disappearing into woods. I had nowhere else to go, so that's where I'd go. The Greyhound bus to Asheville cost $63. I bought a one-way ticket at 7 in the morning on November 18th. The station was full of people traveling for Thanksgiving, families, college students going home. Everyone had somewhere to be. Everyone had people waiting for them. I had a cabin I hadn't seen in 15 years and a dead grandfather who'd left me a mystery I didn't understand yet. The bus ride took 4 hours. I sat by the window and watched the landscape change from city to Piedmont to mountains. The woman next to me tried to make conversation. Visiting family in Asheville? Something like that. Thanksgiving trip? No, just going home. She fell asleep somewhere past Hickory. I pressed my forehead against the cold window and thought about my grandfather. The last time I'd seen him was Christmas 2022, 3 years ago. He'd seemed old then, fragile, but his eyes had been sharp. He'd asked me, "Are you happy, Mary?" And I'd lied and said yes. The bus pulled into Asheville at 11:20. I got a taxi to the cabin. The driver was skeptical. 1847 Old Mountain Road? You sure that's a real address? It's real. My grandfather owned it. Owned, past tense. He died in August. The fare was $58. I watched the number climb on the meter and felt sick. That was $58 I couldn't afford to spend. But I didn't have a choice. The paved road turned to gravel. The gravel turned to dirt. The GPS lost signal. The driver said, "Look, lady, I don't think there's anything up here." Then we rounded a curve and saw the hand-painted sign, Wumble, with an arrow. He followed the driveway for another quarter-mile. Then he stopped. "This is as far as I go. Road's too rough." I paid him. Got out with my suitcases. Watched his taillights disappear down the mountain. I walked the last 200 yards uphill. Cold. Getting colder. The cabin came into view through the pine trees at 12:40 in the afternoon. My first thought was, Mitchell Crane was right. It was a rotting shack. The roof sagged in the middle, missing shingles in patches. The porch steps were half rotted through. I had to test each one before putting my weight on it. The front door stuck, swollen from moisture. I put my shoulder against it and pushed. Something in the frame cracked and the door swung inward. The smell hit me immediately. Mildew, mouse droppings, decay. I stood in the doorway with my suitcases and looked into the dark interior. This was it. This was all I had left. The cabin was maybe 800 square feet. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. Water stains covered the ceiling in the back bedroom. The kitchen faucet dripped rust-colored water. The windows were so filthy I could barely see through them. Dust everywhere. Mouse evidence in the corners. The temperature inside was 43 degrees. I found the breaker box in the basement. More of a dirt floor crawl space than an actual basement. 14 switches. I flipped them all. The lights came on. Weak. Flickering. But on. And that's when I saw the full extent of it. This wasn't a cabin that needed cleaning. This was a cabin that was dying. I went back outside, counted the missing shingles on the roof. 23. The porch was 8 by 12 feet. 3 of the 5 steps were completely rotted through. The paint was peeling everywhere. 60, maybe 70% of the exterior. I sat down carefully on the one step that seemed solid. Pulled out my phone. 1 bar of signal. I Googled. Cost to repair roof, North Carolina. $8,000 to $15,000. I had $1,037 in my bank account. I couldn't fix this. I couldn't sell it in this condition. I couldn't do anything except survive here and hope it didn't collapse on me while I slept. Inside, I found a few things that worked. A space heater in the hall closet. 1,500 watts. Electric. The propane tank was maybe 30% full. There was a bed frame in the main bedroom but no mattress. Some canned goods in the pantry. All expired. 2019, 2020, 2021. In the bedroom closet, I found my grandfather's hunting jacket. Dark green wool. It still smelled like him. Pipe tobacco and Old Spice and pine. I put it on even though it was too big. And I sat on the bare floor in that empty room and cried. Not because of the cabin, but because that jacket meant he'd been here. Recently. And I'd missed him. I'd missed everything. The first week was survival. I took the bus into Boone, 15 miles away, and bought groceries with money I didn't have. $73. Rice, beans, canned soup, instant coffee, bread, one cheap blanket, cleaning supplies. I cleaned the cabin. Not because I thought it would help, but because I needed something to do. Something to make me feel like I wasn't completely useless. The nights were the worst. The temperature dropped to 28 degrees outside. Inside, even with the space heater running, it barely reached 54. I made a pile of blankets on the living room floor and slept as close to the heater as I dared. I cried myself to sleep 6 out of 7 nights. On November 22nd, Philip called. First contact since the divorce. I almost didn't answer. Mary, it's me. I know you're upset, but we should talk. About the cabin. I know someone who might be interested in buying it. Could really help you out. Save you the hassle of trying to maintain it. His tone was fake concern. Underneath it, I could hear urgency. I'm not selling, I said. Silence. Then, Mary, be reasonable. You can't afford to keep it. The property taxes alone. I'm not selling. I hung up. That night, I got an email from a company called TerraSource Mining LLC, subject line, Property Acquisition Inquiry. They were offering $185,000 for all property interests related to 1847 Old Mountain Road. I didn't respond, but I screenshot the email. Some instinct told me I might need it later. By day 6, my bank account was down to $906. I was eating rice and canned beans. The cabin was cleaner, but still falling apart. And I was starting to understand what Mitchell Crane had meant when he'd predicted I'd be begging to sell within a month. On the 7th night, November 24th, I couldn't sleep. Too cold, too quiet, too aware of how completely alone I was. I got up at 2 in the morning and started cleaning again, just to have something to do. That's when I saw the painting above the fireplace. I'd walked past it 100 times that week. My grandfather had made it. Oil on canvas, mountains at sunrise. Simple. Nothing special. Signed ERW 1990, the year I was born. But something about it that night made me stop, made me look, made me reach up and lift it off the wall. The back was bare wood, except for one thing. Taped to the frame with old masking tape was an envelope, 9 by 12 inches, brown paper, sealed with red wax, and my name, written in my grandfather's unmistakable handwriting, Mary Elizabeth Womble. If you're reading this, it's because I'm already gone. My hands were shaking when I broke the seal. Inside were 3 things: a letter, 3 pages, handwritten, blue ink, dated May 3rd, 2023. More than 2 years before my grandfather died. A brass key with a number stamped on it, 1523, and a business card. Helen Pritchard, attorney at law. Asheville, North Carolina. On the back, in my grandfather's script, trust her. She knows everything. I sat down on the floor with my back against the wall, and I read the letter. Mary, I'm writing this now, while my hands can still hold a pen clearly, because I can feel time catching up. I'm 77 years old. I've had a good life, a long life. But I won't live forever, and there are things you need to know. First, I love you. I've loved you since the day you were born. You were the light of my life when your grandmother died. You still are? Second, I know about Philip. I've known for years. Not the specifics, but the type. I've seen 1,000 men like him in 32 years on the bench. Men who marry for strategy, not love. Men who see people as assets to be acquired. I wanted to tell you. God, I wanted to tell you. But you loved him. And I couldn't bear to be the one to break your heart. I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe he'd prove me wrong. But I prepared anyway, just in case. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. It means you've lost something. Maybe everything. It means you came here because you had nowhere else to turn. Good. That means he can't touch this anymore. That means what I've built for you is finally, truly, only yours. The cabin sits on 12 acres, but that's not all you own. I've spent 40 years buying land in these mountains, piece by piece, parcel by parcel, quietly. Most people don't even know the parcels connect. You own 920 acres, Mary, not 12. 920. The land is more than it seems. There's a survey from 2019. Helen has it. It changes everything. I'm hiding this letter where only you will find it. In the place only you will go when everything else is gone. The cabin was always your refuge. Even as a child, you loved it here. Helen Pritchard was my law partner for 25 years. She's the only person I trust with this. The key is for a safety deposit box at First National Bank in Asheville. Box 1523. Helen can get you access. Don't let anyone tell you what you're worth, Mary. Especially not someone who never saw you clearly in the first place. Every acre is yours. Every right. Every future. I bought this land because I knew someday you might need it. Not because you're weak, but because the world can be cruel to people who trust too much. You're stronger than they know. This land will prove it. All my love, Grandpa Edwin. I read the letter twice, then I sat on the floor and cried until the sun came up. But these weren't the same tears I'd cried all week. These were different. These were the beginning of understanding. I called Helen Pritchard at 9 in the morning on December 2nd. She answered on the second ring. Ms. Pritchard, my name is Mary Womble. I think my grandfather, Mary. Her voice was warm, immediate recognition. I've been waiting for you to call. Your grandfather told me if you showed up, it meant you'd survived something terrible. I'm sorry it came to that. We met at her office that afternoon. 412 College Street, Asheville, third floor of a brick building. The sign said Pritchard and Associates. Helen was 68. Gray hair pulled back. Sharp eyes behind reading glasses. She looked at me like she'd known me for years. Sit down, Mary. We have a lot to talk about. She pulled out a folder. Thick. Organized. Tabs with dates going back decades. Your grandfather and I worked together from 1995 to 2020. He was one of the best attorneys I've ever known, and one of the most careful. She opened the folder. He prepared for this conversation years ago. She spread a map across her desk. 12 different parcels, all shaded in blue, all labeled with property identification numbers. This is what you own. She pointed to one small square in the middle. This is where the cabin sits, 12 acres. Then she dragged her finger across the entire map. This is everything else, 908 acres. Your grandfather bought it slowly, parcel by parcel, over 40 years. Most of the deeds are in separate records. Most people don't even know these properties connect. I stared at the map. 920 acres total. My voice came out like a whisper. Why didn't he tell me? Helen's expression softened. He was protecting you. Let me show you something. She pulled out another document, a certified mail receipt, dated August 15th, 2025. I sent you a letter on your 35th birthday. The trust your grandfather established for you had specific terms. You gained full control when you turned 35. I was legally required to notify you. She showed me the receipt. It had been delivered to my old address, the house I'd shared with Philip. It came back to me marked addressee unknown, but the postal service shows it was delivered. She paused. You'd moved out in December 2024, hadn't you? I nodded. After I discovered the affair? Philip set up mail forwarding, I said slowly, to his new address. Helen's expression went hard. Then he intercepted it. He knew about the trust before your divorce was even finalized, and he made sure you didn't. The room felt like it was tilting. How much? I asked. How much is in the trust? Helen opened another folder. The Edwin R. Womble Irrevocable Trust, established in 1992. You were 2 years old. Your grandfather put assets aside over 33 years, municipal bonds, a commercial property in Charlotte, diversified investments. She showed me the account summary. $6.81 million. I couldn't breathe. I don't understand. I just went through a divorce. They took everything. How did they not know? It's a premarital separate asset, Helen said, protected from division. But only if you knew about it. Only if you could assert your rights. She looked at me steadily. Philip's lawyer would have known to ask about trusts during discovery. Either you never mentioned it because you didn't know, or Philip specifically concealed it. I thought about the 10 months of legal proceedings, the mediations, the depositions, the questions about my family's assets. I'd told them my grandfather had left me a cabin. That was all I knew. They delayed the divorce on purpose, I said. Helen nodded. They were waiting for you to get desperate enough to sell the land without asking questions. She handed me another document, a geological survey report, dated June 2019. Your grandfather commissioned this 6 years ago. He never told me why, but I think now we know. I opened it. Technical language, maps, data tables, and one section highlighted in yellow. Lithium-bearing pegmatite formations identified across 6 parcels. Estimated reserves, 12 to 18 million tons lithium ore. Projected extraction value, $80 to $120 million over 20-year period. I looked up at Helen. Lithium, she said quietly. For batteries, electric vehicles. Your grandfather knew the land was valuable, but I don't think even he knew how valuable until this survey came back. She pulled out one more document, an email thread. I've been doing some research since I realized you might be in trouble. This came up in a public records search. The sender, j.hutchins@terrasource-mining.com. The recipient, philip.ashford@ashfordlaw.com. Dated October 2020, 5 years ago. Subject, Womble Property Acquisition Strategy. I didn't need to read the whole thing. The first few lines were enough. Confirming your geological intel from March 2019. If lithium deposits are as described, we're looking at 9-figure extraction value over 20 years. Recommend we proceed with long-term acquisition strategy, as discussed. Target timeline, finalize divorce. Q 3/20/25. Approach subject Q 4/2025 while financially distressed. Lowball offer $150,000 citing tax burden and maintenance costs. March 2019. 9 months after Philip and I got married. He'd commissioned his own survey, before my grandfather did, and he'd been planning this ever since. He knew, I said. My voice sounded strange, distant. The whole time. He knew what the land was worth. Helen's expression was carefully neutral. It appears so. I thought about our marriage. 7 years. The way he'd always discouraged me from visiting the cabin. Called it too far, too rustic, too inconvenient. The way he'd scheduled trips and events on weekends when I'd suggested going to the mountains. I thought about the affair. September 2024. Had that even been real? Or had it just been an exit strategy when he was ready to move forward with his plan? I thought about the divorce. 10 months of brutal legal warfare. Mitchell Crane's hallway speech. The humiliation. The poverty. All of it calculated. All of it planned. What do? I asked. Helen looked at me for a long moment. Then she smiled. It was the first time I'd seen her smile. You fight back. I spent the next 2 weeks learning everything I could. North Carolina mineral rights law, lithium mining regulations, trust law, legal ethics codes. I sat in the Appalachian State Library for hours, taking notes, building understanding. Helen connected me with specialists. Joyce Brennan, a title attorney. Dr. Paul Vance, a geologist who could explain the survey in plain English. And Neil Torres, a forensic accountant. We started gathering evidence. Neil found the smoking gun on January 18th, 2026. He called me at 6:47 in the evening. His voice was tight, controlled. Mary, I found it, the proof. Philip had taken out a loan in September 2024, $2.3 million from Piedmont Capital Partners. The loan application listed the purpose as acquisition of mineral rights, North Carolina lithium deposits. The collateral was described as pending acquisition, Womble property, Watauga County, estimated value 15 to 20 million. The loan was dated September 20th, 2024, 8 days after I discovered his affair. 3 months before I'd even filed for divorce. He was planning to divorce me before I even knew, I said. Worse, Neil said. He borrowed against your land. Land he didn't own. Land he was planning to steal from you through legal manipulation. That's not just unethical. That's fraud. Potentially criminal fraud. I sat in the cabin and stared at my phone for a long time after we hung up. All those months, I'd thought I was the one who'd broken our marriage. I'd thought the affair was my fault somehow, that I hadn't been enough, hadn't tried hard enough. But it had never been about me at all. It had been about 920 acres of lithium-rich mountain land, worth over $100 million. December passed, then January. Philip kept calling. His tone shifted from fake concern to irritation to barely concealed anger. TerraSource kept emailing. Their offers went up. $225,000, $280,000, $310,000. Final offer. I didn't respond to any of them, but I kept records of everything. On January 18th, I got a text from an unknown number. Mary, this is getting embarrassing. Just take the money and move on. You're not cut out for property ownership. You never were cut out for much of anything. I knew it was Philip. The phrasing, the condescension. He'd made a burner number thinking I wouldn't recognize him. I screenshot the message, sent it to Helen with a note. Evidence item 17, harassment. Then I blocked the number and went back to reading the North Carolina Rules of Professional Conduct. Specifically Rule 8.4, misconduct. The section about attorneys who engage in conduct involving dishonesty, fraud, deceit, or misrepresentation. It was 32 pages long. I read every word twice. On Christmas, I was alone in the cabin. Outside temperature was 19 degrees. Inside, with the space heater, it was 58. I cooked my grandfather's venison stew. I'd found the recipe in one of his notebooks. Next to the ingredients, he'd written, Mary's favorite, age 12. I'd forgotten about that. But eating it brought the memory back. Sitting at this same table, him teaching me to cook, telling me stories about when he was young. I thought about last Christmas, 2024. Philip had still been having his affair. I hadn't known. He'd given me a $300 spa voucher. Impersonal. Detached. I'd tried to tell myself it was thoughtful. I stood on the porch that night after dinner. The stars were out. The mountains were dark shapes against the sky. My grandfather used to say the land remembers everything. Every person who walked it. Every promise made on it. Every wrong that needs righting. I didn't believe him when I was young. But standing there on Christmas, I understood. This land remembered me. It had been waiting for me. And it was going to help me become who I was supposed to be before Philip tried to erase it. Helen recruited the team in January. Joyce Brennan, the title attorney, Neil Torres, the forensic accountant, and Helen herself, working pro bono in memory of my grandfather. We met on January 25th in Helen's conference room. Here's what we have, Helen said, laying out documents on the table. 89 emails between Philip and Jay Hutchins, CEO of TerraSource Mining, dating from 2019 to 2025. Philip's March 2019 geological survey, commissioned 3 months before my grandfather's survey. The September 2024 loan documents, collateralized by my land before he had any legal claim to it. The intercepted trust notification letter, federal mail tampering. 6 text messages from the burner number, harassment. TerraSource Incorporation documents showing Philip as a 23% equity holder. Registered agent, Mitchell Crane. This isn't just a bad divorce, Helen said. This is systematic fraud. Breach of fiduciary duty. Potentially RICO if we can prove it's an ongoing criminal enterprise. Joyce nodded. We can file a motion to set aside the divorce settlement based on fraud upon the court, seek punitive damages, and we need to file with the state bar. How much will this cost? I asked. Helen looked at me. Your trust allows for legal defense expenses, up to $50,000. We're going to use it. She turned to the whiteboard and drew 3 boxes. Phase 1. Establish Philip's knowledge of property value before the divorce. We have his 2019 survey. We have the loan documents. That's done. Phase 2. Prove deliberate concealment and manipulation. We have the intercepted letter, the emails, the texts. Also done. Phase 3. Confrontation. We present everything. We give them a choice. Settle quietly or we go public and file criminal charges. She capped the marker and turned to me. When do we start? I asked. Helen smiled. We already did. 2 months ago, when you walked into my office. On February 14th, Valentine's Day, we had the meeting. Helen scheduled it deliberately. She had a sense of irony. Location, her conference room. Attendees, me, Helen, and Joyce, on one side of the table. Philip, Mitchell Crane, and Jay Hutchins on the other. The meeting was framed as a settlement discussion regarding property dispute. Philip walked in wearing a suit that probably cost $3,000. He looked confident, almost bored. That lasted about 3 minutes. Helen opened her laptop and projected a presentation onto the screen. 52 slides. Let's begin, she said. Slide 1. Timeline. 2019 to 2025. Every significant date highlighted. Slide 2. Email evidence. 89 messages. Subject lines visible. Slide 3. Geological surveys. 2 of them. March 2019. Phillips. June 2019. Edwins. Slide 4. Loan documents. $2.3 million. Collateral. Womble property. Slide 5. Intercepted mail. Certified receipt. Federal offense. Philip's face went white around slide 10. Mitchell Crane stopped taking notes around slide 15. Jay Hutchins tried to interrupt at slide 20. Helen held up a hand. We're not done. By slide 30, the evidence was overwhelming. By slide 40, it was crushing. Slide 50 showed the text messages from the burner number, including the one from January. You're not cut out for much of anything. Slide 51 showed phone records linking that number to Philip's name. Slide 52 was just one sentence. We can prove everything. Helen closed the laptop. So, she said calmly, let's talk about settlement. Jay Hutchins spoke first. We're prepared to offer $1.2 million for a long-term mineral rights lease. No, I said. Everyone looked at me. I'm not leasing, I'm not selling. TerraSource gets nothing. You get nothing. Hutchins's face reddened. Ms. Womble, be reasonable. I am being reasonable, I said. You're the ones who committed fraud. Mitchell Crane tried to bluff. This is circumstantial. You can't prove intent. I opened my folder, pulled out a single sheet of paper, slid it across the table to Philip. It was a text message. Sent from Philip to Jay Hutchins on October 28th, 2025, the day after our divorce was finalized. Divorce complete. She has no idea about the deposits. Moving forward with acquisition timeline as planned. I watched the color drain from Philip's face. I watched Mitchell close his eyes. I watched Hutchins push back from the table. Then I said very quietly, I can prove everything, Philip. Every lie. Every manipulation. Every single day you pretended to love me while you were planning to rob me. The question isn't whether I can prove it. The question is whether you want this to go public, or whether you want to settle this quietly before I file with the state bar and the district attorney. Helen put a hand on my shoulder. You have 24 hours to decide. They responded in 18 hours. The settlement negotiation took 6 hours. Back and forth. Their lawyer, our lawyer. Phone calls, revised terms. Final agreement signed February 16th, 2026. Philip would pay me $950,000, wire transfer within 15 business days. He would provide a written statement acknowledging material misrepresentation during divorce proceedings. sealed record, but usable in bar proceedings. He would not contest the North Carolina State Bar investigation. He would relinquish all deferred divorce settlement payments, the $12,000 he'd promised over 18 months. TerraSource would abandon all acquisition attempts, forever. Mitchell Crane separately negotiated to avoid personal sanctions in exchange for testimony about Philip's instructions during the divorce. I signed the settlement at 4:33 in the afternoon. Helen witnessed it. Joyce notarized it. When it was done, Helen asked, "How do you feel?" I thought about it. I didn't feel happy exactly. I didn't feel victorious in the way I'd imagined. I felt like I'd survived something that was designed to kill me, like I'd walked through fire and come out made of something stronger and stranger than I'd been before. I feel like my grandfather would be proud, I said. Helen's eyes got bright. He already was, Mary. That's why he left you everything. He knew you were strong enough to fight for it. He just had to wait for you to know it too. The North Carolina State Bar filed their investigation on March 3, 2026. Case number 2026-03-0829. Charges against Philip Ashford: conflict of interest, fraud upon the court, conduct involving dishonesty, conduct prejudicial to the administration of justice. Charges against Mitchell Crane: harassment, conduct demeaning to the profession. The hearing was on March 12th. Helen went as a witness. I didn't. I didn't need to be there. She called me afterward from her car. It's done. Philip suspended for 18 months minimum. Mitchell got a public reprimand and a $15,000 fine. It's in the record now. Permanent. I was standing on the cabin porch when she called, watching the afternoon sun drop behind the ridge. I thought about my grandfather, about all the years he'd sat on a bench in that same courthouse delivering justice, about how he'd taught me, without ever saying it directly, that the law isn't just words on paper. It's the promise that people can't just take from you and walk away clean. Thank you, Helen, I said, for everything. She was quiet for a moment. Your grandfather would have loved watching you do this. He'd be so damn proud. By mid-March, my financial situation had changed. $950,000 from the settlement, received March 5th, $6.81 million in the trust, full access, and land, 920 acres, conservatively worth $15 to $20 million with the lithium rights. I had options. I could sell everything, walk away, start fresh somewhere else. I could lease the mineral rights and live off the royalties, or I could do something else. On March 18th, I walked the property line. All 920 acres. It took me 7 hours. I saw the places my grandfather had marked with stone cairns, the meadow where he'd taught me to identify wildflowers when I was 8, the ridge where we'd watched eagles. Every step felt like a conversation with him. When I got back to the cabin, the sun was setting. I sat on the front porch, the same porch I'd arrived at 4 months ago with 2 suitcases and no hope, and I made my decision. I wasn't going to sell, not 1 acre. I contacted Appalachian Sustainable Resources, an ethical mining company with a track record of environmental protection. We negotiated a mineral rights lease, 15 years, 16% royalty on gross extraction. Strict environmental protections built into the contract. Estimated annual income, $380,000 to $520,000. More than enough. I hired a contractor to restore the cabin, not to modernize it, not to turn it into something it wasn't, but to fix the roof, repair the foundation, preserve the history. $118,000. And I used the trust income to do something else. I leased commercial space in downtown Asheville, 1,200 square feet. I hired my first attorney to start in June. The Edwin Womble Legal Justice Center, a legal aid clinic, for people going through divorce who can't afford proper representation, for people who've been left with nothing and told they're worthless. People like me. Helen agreed to serve on the advisory board. The opening was planned for June 2026. My grandfather had built me an inheritance. I was going to build a legacy. On March 28th, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Postmark, Charlotte. Inside was a single sentence in handwriting I recognized. Phillips, I underestimated you. I held the letter for a long time, standing on the porch in the morning sun. Then I walked to the fireplace, struck a match, and burned it. I didn't need his acknowledgement. I didn't need his apology. I didn't need his recognition that I'd won. I didn't need anything from him at all. I had my grandfather's land. I had my grandfather's legacy. I had my name back. Not as someone's wife, not as someone's victim, but as myself. Mary Womble, 35 years old, owner of 920 acres, founder of a legal clinic that would open in 3 months, granddaughter of a judge who'd loved me enough to build me a fortress disguised as a cabin. That was more than enough. I stepped out onto the porch. The mountains were turning green with spring. The dogwoods were blooming. The air smelled like pine and rain and soil and new beginnings. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, maybe for the first time ever, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not because someone else had put me there, but because I'd fought my way here, and I'd earned every single step.